So, this is the 10th and final entry in my Chinese myth series. All the traditional tales I'm about to share were translated by me, way back before Google Translate existed, from children's books that I picked up while traveling in China. These are the stories that Chinese people know and love in the same way Westerners know and love the Grimm's fairy tales. And honestly, many of these stories have inspired movies, TV shows, comic books, and all sorts of adaptations that are really worth checking out. The Cowherd and the Weaving Maid. In heaven there lived an immortal fairy maiden named Xinu, the Weaving Maid. She could use a magical thread to weave layer upon layer of beautiful clouds. These clouds could also change color with the seasons. She and another immortal, Qianyu Xing, who is Altair the Cowherd star, had a lot in common, and well, they fell in love. But the immortals of heaven weren't allowed to love one another without permission. After the heavenly mother Wang found out, she banished Qianyu Xing to the human world. Xinu missed him so much. All day long her face was just washed in tears, and her eyebrows were always knotted in worry. One day several of the fairy maidens begged Queen Mother Wang to let them go to the human world to play at Jade Lotus Pond and help Xinu drive away her cares. Wang agreed. It's said that after Qianyu Xing was banished to the human world, he was reborn into a peasant family and named Niu Lang, which means cowherd. After Niu Lang's parents passed away, his older brother and his sister-in-law bullied him in earnest, drove him out of the house, and only gave him one old cow. After that, Niu Lang and the cow really depended on one another to live. Niu Lang cultivated some land to farm and built a house. Several years passed, and at last he had a small homestead. But aside from the old cow, there was only Niu Lang in the family home, and honestly the days passed cold and lonely. In reality, the old cow was actually the star of the celestial golden bull Taurus, who originally carried messages for Qianyu Xing and Xinu and was also banished from the heavenly court. One day the old cow suddenly opened its mouth and spoke to Niu Lang. "Oh, Niu Lang, today the immortal fairy maidens will come down into the world to bathe in Jade Lotus Pond. If you go and hide the red robe of immortality, then the fairy it belongs to will become your wife." Niu Lang was amazed and wonderingly asked, "Brother Cow, you can talk. Is what you say really true?" The cow nodded its head. Niu Lang happily hurried to Jade Lotus Pond, hid in a thicket of reeds by the bank of the pond, and waited for the maidens to arrive. Before long, the beautiful fairies arrived as expected, floating in the air. They undressed and jumped into the clear water of the pond, bathing and chatting. Then Niu Lang came out of the reed bed and carried off the red cloak of immortality. The fairy maidens saw that a human had come and quickly got dressed and flew away. Only one fairy couldn't find her red robe and was unable to escape. That fairy maiden was Xinu. When Xinu saw that her own cloak of immortality was in the hand of a young man, she became shy and nervous. As soon as Niu Lang saw Xinu, he was just drawn to her and felt like he recognized her from a long time ago. He stepped out and sincerely requested that Xinu be his wife. Xinu looked up and saw that Niu Lang was really her own Qianyu Xing, whom she had missed day and night, and was both surprised and happy, so she nodded her head, blushing, and agreed. Xinu became Niu Lang's wife, and the two of them loved each other and were kind to one another. 9 years passed. They had a pair of daughters, and their days passed happily. One day, Niu Lang hurried home from tilling the fields and spoke sadly to Xinu. "The old cow has died. But before he passed death's door, he told me to take his hide, and if something ever happens, to drape it over my shoulders, and then I would be able to fly up to heaven." Xinu heard this and thought it was strange, but still let Niu Lang keep the cow's hide and bury the old cow properly. Suddenly the air was filled with a fierce wind, and many soldiers came down from the heavens, and without a word they grabbed Xinu and flew straight back to heaven. In fact, when Queen Mother Wang found out that Xinu went down to the mortal world to get married, she was enraged and sent the celestial soldiers to go and bring her back. Xinu cried out anxiously, "Niu Lang, put on the cow's hide!" Niu Lang quickly put both his children in wicker baskets, carried them on a pole across his shoulders, put on the cow's hide, and flew up to heaven after her. Niu Lang was about to overtake Xinu when Wang suddenly pulled out her golden hairpin and with it drew a line between them. In a split second there appeared a huge river surging between them, separating them completely. Xinu gazed toward the opposite bank with Niu Lang and their children and cried broken-hearted. Niu Lang and the children also wept bitterly as if they were dying. Queen Mother Wang Mu saw this scene and didn't have the heart to go through with it, so she agreed to let Niu Lang and the children stay in heaven and allow them to be a whole family for the first week of the 7th month once every year. Since then, Niu Lang and his daughters have lived in heaven, gazing at Ji-nu from across the great river through heaven, the Milky Way separating them. The first week of the 7th month every year, thousands and thousands of black-billed magpies fly in and make a bridge across the Milky Way, allowing them to come together. It is said that if you listen quietly and carefully, you can still hear them endlessly speaking words of love to each other. Wang Di becomes a cuckoo. Very early in history, the people on the western embankment of the Shu Kingdom mostly made their living by fishing. They arrived in the wind and departed in the waves. It was pretty dangerous. If there was a fierce wind or torrential rain, there was just no way to go to sea, and many people would go hungry. Days passed in great difficulty. One day, a strange man suddenly fell from the sky. He was called Du Yu and claimed to have the solution for dealing with the natural disasters. He taught people how to cultivate a wild area for farming and to plant grains and vegetables. Under Du Yu's command, people were industrious and hard-working, until at last they made the desolate Shu lands become productive and abundant fertile lands. Everyone was completely grateful and unanimously chose him to serve as the king of Shu, known as Wang Di, or Hope Emperor. However, good times can't last forever. One year the rains were especially large and the river water overflowed. At that time, one person called Biling requested an audience with Wang Di and said that he could rule the water. So Wang Di sent him to manage the flood. Biling led the common people to fight bravely for several years, and as expected, they completely controlled the flooding. Because of his meritorious deeds controlling the waters, Wang Di let the title of king be given to him and be known as Kong Di. He continued to lead the Shu people to excel at irrigation and waterworks, to open more land for farming, causing the Shu people to live happy lives. But as time went on, Kong Di became prideful and arrogant, thus not concerned with the pain and suffering of the common people. After Wang Di found out, he was burning with anxiety and decided to go into the palace to advise Kong Di. After the common people heard this, they followed one after another behind Wang Di, wanting to go into town together and see Kong Di. Kong Di saw this situation and was worried that Wang Di would take back the title of king, so he ordered the city gates to be shut. Wang Di had no way into the city, so he changed into a cuckoo bird, flew onto a large tree in the Shu Palace Imperial Gardens, and cried in a loud voice, "People are precious! People are precious!" Kong Di heard the cuckoo's plaintive call and made up his mind to improve. The cuckoo flew out to the fields, calling non-stop, "Cuckoo, cuckoo," urging people to master farming seasons, to work diligently plowing and planting. The common people knew that the cuckoo was Wang Di Du Yu transformed, so they called it the Du Cuckoo. Du Cuckoo cried day and night. Every cry shed a drop of blood, dropped on the ground, and gave rise to a cluster of red flowers. People call this kind of flower the Du Cuckoo flower, and we know it as a rhododendron. Once upon a time there was a place called A Zhaodi, where the poverty-stricken Gelu Reming family birthed a beautiful daughter. Father and mother hoped that she would be a precious shining thing like gold, so they gave her the name Ashima, which means gold. Ashima gradually grew up. Her beauty was like that of the gorgeous Mei flower. She could sing and was good at dancing. Many young men were all fond of her. She fell in love with her childhood friend and sweetheart, the kind and loving orphan Ahei, and promised she would not fail to marry him. At the Torch Festival one year, she and clever brave Ahei got engaged. One day, Ashima was hurrying down the street when Az, the son of the Ajaudi rich man, Rebubala, took a fancy to her. Az wanted to take Ashima for a wife, so he went back home to plead with his father to find a matchmaker in order to propose marriage. Rebubala requested the powerful and influential matchmaker Hai Rei to go ahead to discuss marriage. The matchmaker first used sweet speech and honeyed words to persuade Ashima to wed Az. Later on he used threats and bribes, but it was all to no avail. Ashima simply would not agree. In no time at all, autumn arrived, the water grew cold, and the grass dried up in Ajaudi. The sheep could no longer eat their fill. Ahei had no choice but to bid farewell to Ashima, driving the flock of sheep to faraway Dian Nan to graze. After Ahei left, Rebubala dispatched a hired thug and his own household servant to capture Ashima and force her to get married. From beginning to end, Ashima did not comply. She refused to marry Az. Rebubala flew into a humiliated rage and ordered his servant to use the lash to flog Ashima ferociously. Finally, he commanded her to be placed in a dark prison. Ashima suffered the worst hardships, but she believed without a doubt that Ahei would certainly come to save her. One day, Ahei was in the middle of grazing the sheep when a town crier from Ajaudi found him and told him the news that Ashima had been captured. Ahei immediately spurred his horse into action. He traveled at full speed day and night and hurriedly returned home to rescue Ashima. He arrived at the entrance of Rebubala's home. Az, who had securely closed the main gate and would not let him in, suggested that he and Ahei should sing a duet, and only if Ahei beat him would he allow him to enter the gate. Az sat on the upstairs of the gate, and Ahei sat beneath a tree. Both men faced off singing. They dueled for 3 days and 3 nights. Az lacked talent and had little knowledge. The more he sang, the fewer lyrics he had. He quickly became red in the face and angry. His voice became more and more unpleasant to hear. However, the more that talented and knowledgeable Ahei sang, the more energetic he became. His face was suffused with a smile. His singing voice was strong and clear. Ahei won at last. Az had no choice but to let him through the main gate, but Az wanted to make it hard in all respects, so he suggested to Ahei that they compete at chopping trees, catching trees, and planting seeds. How could Az have Ahei's skill at this workmanship? Ahei excelled over Az in all these things. Rebubala flew into a humiliated rage and had his servant release 3 tigers to pounce on Ahei. Ahei drew out his bow and arrows and shot at the tigers. Whoosh, 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 3 arrows in a row, and shot 3 tigers dead, then rescued Ashima. Rebubala father and son watched anxiously as Ahei led Ashima away. They refused to accept it and thought of a completely heartless evil plan. They knew that Ahei and Ashima would have to pass by 12 cliff bases on their way home, so they collaborated with the cliff spirits to change the small river at the base of the cliffs into a large river. They hoped to drown Ahei and Ashima. Rebubala father and son brought along their servant. They overtook Ahei and Ashima and arrived at the river before them. They pushed aside the stones for walking across the small river and let the water out. When Ahei and Ashima got to the river, a surging flood arrived as well. Ashima was swept up into a whirlpool, and soon no sign of her could be seen. Ahei, struggling up the bank, looked everywhere for Ashima. He searched and searched. He searched until the big river became a small river, but he never found Ashima. He cried out in a loud voice, "Ashima, Ashima!" but he heard only the 12 cliff tops answering, "Ashima, Ashima." Actually, a girl named Yingshanj on the top of the 12 cliffs saw Ashima carried off by the flood, so she jumped into the whirlpool and rescued Ashima. And together, living under the cliffs, Ashima became the goddess Shopai Shin, the echo goddess. From then on, whatever you shout to her, she answers back to you. Her voice forever echoes in the stone forest. Ashima was made into a very famous film in 1964. It's a little hard to watch because it's a weird cross between a colorized silent film and a musical. Yeah, that makes no sense to me either, but see for yourself. The story is about the Sani ethnic minority, hence the distinctive clothing. Legend has it that a long time ago, the Jade Emperor decided to choose a few animals to grant immortal status, to represent the zodiac of the mortal world. All the animals could go to the heavenly temple to be chosen. They would be ranked according to the order in which they arrived, and what's more, only the first 12 to arrive would be chosen. Back then, Mouse and Cat were great friends. They agreed to go to the heavenly temple together. However, when the appointed day arrived, Mouse didn't go call on Cat and instead hurried to the heavenly temple on his own. On the road, Mouse ran into Cow. Cow took such large strides forward as he walked that Mouse ran along, gasping for breath until he caught up with Cow. Mouse thought to himself, "The road is still far and I already can't run any faster. What should I do?" He rolled his eyes, thought of a plan, and said, "Brother Cow, how boring is this walk? I'll come sing for you." Cow said, "All right." But after waiting a while, he still didn't hear any singing. Cow asked, "Hey, how come you aren't singing?" Mouse said, "I am singing. How come you can't hear me?" "Oh, my voice is too soft." "How about this? I'll sit astride your neck and sing, then you'll be able to hear." Cow said, "All right." Mouse then climbed up Cow's neck and made Cow carry him. Now he could save his breath. He bobbed his head and began to sing in earnest. As Cow listened to the singing, he also let loose his legs and put all his effort into running. He ran until he saw the place to enroll or sign up. The other animals had not yet arrived. Then happily he cried, "Moo! I am number—" Cow hadn't finished speaking when Mouse leapt down from atop Cow's neck and got in front of Cow. As a result, Mouse came in first and Cow came in second. Not long after, Tiger and Rabbit arrived one after the other. 12 kinds of animals quickly filled the line. They were mouse, cow, tiger, rabbit, dragon, snake, horse, sheep, monkey, rooster, dog, and pig. Cat waited at home a long time, but Mouse never came to call on him. He had no choice but to go to the heavenly temple on his own. As soon as he hurried over, the 12 zodiac limit was already filled. Cat got angry, and when he saw Mouse, he pounced to bite him, and so it continues to this very day. In some versions of this story, Mouse meets Cat, and they both ride on Cow until Mouse pushes Cat off into the water about halfway. Either way, Cat gets betrayed by Mouse and ends up eternally angry about it. Because of translation difficulties, the signs of mouse and cow are often seen in English as rat and ox, but it is the same thing in Chinese.